Hi, I'm David Alston, and welcome to the Underground Subway. Thank you for joining this podcast, a podcast that's dedicated to one thing, to giving you the tools and strategies needed to live a better, a more productive, and freer life. What do I mean by a freer life? A life full of liberty, a life full of the ability. What is liberty? The ability to think, to function, to move, to operate without restraints. Things have been holding us down and holding us back long enough. And this podcast is dedicated to laying on the table all of the strategies and experiences that we have gone through to make life better, not just for you, but for the next generation. So sit back and enjoy this podcast, The Underground Subway. I want to thank you again for joining me. I want to get right into the podcast. I want to get right into my guest for this particular podcast, Ms. Kathy White. Kathy developed her joint renewal system when she turned 50. And despite teaching yoga for over 20 years, her joints were aching. Her menopausal symptoms were raging, and she was not gaining any benefit from her practice anymore. She retrained in the Kuwait method and has now refined it into a jointful yoga for active men and women over 50 who want to keep on doing the sports and activities they love. It's kind of like adding WD-40 to your joints. Kathy offers a unique and mindful approach to body and mind that rejuvenates the body, calms the nervous system, and builds strength and vitality as people age. Now, you may be wondering, why are we going to discuss this on the Underground Subway? I'm glad you asked. It's because if we're going to live a better life, we need to live a better life holistically, not just emotionally, not just being motivated to get out and achieve our goals and our dreams, but I want to live a better life physically. Well, that being said, I want to welcome to the Underground Subway my guest, Kathy White. Kathy, thank you so much for joining the Underground Subway.
David, thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you.
Well, let's get right into it. Number one, right off the bat. I guess this podcast is for me, and that you get to a certain age. When I work out, I lift weights, I'm starting to really see the results. The arms are bigger and swollen, and I'm just feeling good. But yet there comes a time when I just feel like, oh man, I feel like I've been hit by a truck when you try to sit up and get out of the bed. What's going on?
What's going on? That's a really good question. What I think happens is that most of us have been fed this line from fitness gurus and gymnasiums and activity centers that go build muscle, do your cardio, do this, run, jog, pull weights, get on the machines, do your spin class, and all of that, which is fabulous. Don't get me wrong. It's all fabulous. Go cycling, go swimming, go do a round of golf. However, none of that ever lets you stop and just take stock of, how are my joints moving here?
Mm-hmm.
Until what usually happens is there's an injury, and it's like, oh, my knee's sore, or my hip has gone out, or my shoulder is aching, or my elbow, wrist, my ankle. Until that point of injury or accident or whatever, where you feel it really badly, most people pay no attention to their joints.
Mm-hmm.
So this approach is turning all of that focus and attention to say, yes, build muscle, yes, work out, yes, go to the gym, and add a little jointful, mindful renewal practice into whatever it is that you're doing with your body.
That is so true, because I recently, or last year, I'm not going to say recently, a year ago, coaching a high school football game, and the players ran to the sideline and they they fell right at my feet and rolled up my leg, and a knee injury that I'm still a year later, I still walk with a limp, and sometimes I walk with it unconsciously. And so I totally agree with you. It's that, things like that. How can yoga help someone in my case where you have a bad knee or back or whatever? How does yoga differ from just stretching or anything like that? Talk to us about yoga.
Yeah. Well, why? I mean, and I would say not all yogas are created equally. So when I'm talking about yoga, I'm talking about mine. I think you called it in the intro a Kuwait method. It's actually Kayut. I'll
Kayut.
spell that.
Okay, thank you. I look. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's fine. So it's actually from Brazil, not Kuwait,
Okay.
and developed by a chap called Francisco Kayut. That's his surname. And from that basis, that foundation, my trainings with Francisco, I developed this joint renewal system because the foundation is to look at joints in a different way. And other yoga practices might put more emphasis on stretching, on certain poses or sequences of movement within the body. Whereas in the system I teach, I have people do very slow movements, but very mindful. So, it's funny. I love teaching yoga teachers because their eyes just get so wide open. They come to a class and maybe they can do some of these fancy poses, standing on their head or doing some kind of pretzel shape, getting into all sorts of contortions. And then I'll say, okay, put your legs up the wall and flex your ankles, like just point your toes down towards your shins. And then I'll hold them there for 5 minutes and their ankles will be burning and they will not have realized how much restriction they had in that joint up until that point. And all they're doing is lying on the floor, legs up the wall, and folding their ankles.
Wow.
So that kind of intense emphasis on one particular joint, and then we do it through every single joint. So there's a pose and there's a different pose and there's a different pose for all the different joints that we access. And some poses, of course, access multiple joints at the same time. But that time, we use time as our friend to reveal the restrictions. Because most of the time, like with your knee there, David, you're walking around, you're aware there's a problem, but you've found a compensatory pattern, which includes a bit of a limp, but your body has delivered what you think you really need, which is to get up and go. Mm-hmm. What we say in yoga is slow down and stop. Don't get up and go anymore because you need to slow down and stop to be able to undo those patterns and those compensatory patterns that might have built up around an injury or an accident.
So do you think that you said that a teacher such as yourself, is it okay for me to, is it better for me to find someone like yourself that's a teacher? Or would you say that it's better for me to, or is it okay for me to just hop on YouTube and find a YouTube yoga video?
Well, the problem with YouTube is, and there's some brilliant teachers out there and lovely work that they're doing on YouTube. However, you don't get the feedback. It's a one-way system. Right. So that's the problem, is that you're not getting feedback from a teacher. So I really recommend working, even with, I have lots of students who join my membership area, and that the way that they work is through recordings. However, number one, they're audio recordings. So they're not looking at my body. My body has 25, 30 years of yoga in it. So my body is going to move with 25, 30 years of yoga practice behind right. every movement. That's going to look very different from someone who has been a football player or someone who's been playing golf or tennis and wants to continue their practice and they've never been on a yoga mat before. So it doesn't actually help them looking at my body. So it's an audio recording. And then I also offer a live class once a month so they can hop on and I can have a look. They don't watch me practice and demonstrate. I look at them. They've got the camera on themselves, and I'm looking through my Zoom windows at everyone. And I can see the patterns. I can see what they need to change. I can adjust. I can make alignment corrections. So if you're on YouTube, you don't get that feedback. You don't get that interaction. Mm-hmm. And many of my students, they'll just come to the Zoom classes, which I also run as a separate thing. From the membership, just regular week in, week out Zoom classes. And that is the best way to get that feedback, because I'm watching you rather than you watching the teacher. That's the big difference.
So is yoga considered an exercise?
Oh, it is these days. You know, people lump it all in together and say, yes, yoga, you know, I did my gym class, and then I did my spin class, and then I did my aqua aerobics class, and then I did my yoga, and it's all classified in the same box, I think, often because it's often held in the same facility. You know, it's often held in the same gym. So of course you classify it in the same category. However, you know, when yoga started being popular in the 60s, say 1960s, I guess it started coming into the West. It was always practiced in people's living rooms. It was a very much more intimate environment, and it would contain a lot of meditation. And,
right. Okay.
And you know, it does have spiritual roots, which, you know, are, in my opinion, very accessible, and you don't have to go down that route other than just know there's a beautiful, kind, loving, compassionate moral code to yoga, as there is to Christianity, as there is to Buddhism, as there is to Judaism, when you find the core teachings, as there is to Islam too. You know, just that love, that compassion, that kindness that's at the heart of any of these world religions or teachings. So Hinduism and yoga, yes, they're quite closely linked. But that separation, you know, from its roots of it being a meditation to it becoming just a fitness thing, is where I think we start to see it go a little wrong, and people start being injured through yoga. Now that's ridiculous that you should have a yoga injury. It's just, to me, that's just like, what? How would that ever happen? But that's because I teach a very, very safe yoga.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is there a difference between, or is there a connection between the yoga affecting the physical body with the joints and emotionally? And
well, for sure.
Yeah, I think you kind of answered that, you know, there is.
Yeah, I mean, you know, whatever is being held onto in the mind will ultimately manifest in the physical body. I really believe that, and I see that.
How closely is yoga with Pilates? Is there a big of a difference?
There's some overlap. I mean, Pilates is a very new, it's quite a modern, I think it was, I know very little about Pilates other than it's, you know, maybe 100 years old or something like that, maybe 200 years old, maybe 50 years old. I don't know, but it's not thousands and thousands of years old, which is what yoga is.
So, you know, someone like myself, that you struggle, like I mentioned, you get a certain age when you're in the floor, you got to get up, and or I'll take a little step further, and I hope the listeners don't laugh too much at this, but you get to a certain age and you feel like in order to get out the car, you always need the assistance of the windshield. You have to reach that arm out and kind of pull yourself out of the car. And, you know, yoga. So you're saying that yoga can really help with joint flexibility or things like that?
Yeah, with that mobility. So here's a story for you, David. My now 91-year-old father still practices with me on Zoom twice a week. He lives in the UK and I live in Canada, and he joins on Zoom And I do classes where you have to get up and down off the floor fairly regularly. Sometimes all the classes on the floor, sometimes a lot of the classes standing, but some of the classes you're up and down like a yo-yo.
Mm-hmm.
When I think back to his progress, I go back to our family holiday we took in Florida, and he was 85 years old at the time. And we took off a side trip off to the beach, and I was there with my two kids, him, their grandfather, and myself. We sat down on the beach. We had a lovely time. The kids were playing in the sea, and then they came back and said, okay, let's jump back in the car. We all stood up to leave, and my dad couldn't get off the beach. He couldn't get up. He couldn't stand up. And I wasn't strong enough to help him. I had my 10-year-old boy kind of like, well, how will I help granddad get up? And my daughter, who was 14, and I mean, it was just like, oh my God, we're stuck. It was like having a beached whale. And he's not overweight. He's not, he's just a tall man and, regular size, but he just didn't have the mobility or the flexibility to get off the ground. Now, today, he comes to yoga. He's up and down with everyone else, all the other people from, whatever age they are. And although I say yoga for over 50s, I have people in their 30s and 40s also join my classes because they're thinking ahead to what they think life could be like at 50 if they don't practice.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad is with the best of them, just moving around. I mean, yes, he's stiff, but he's a lot more flexible than he was at 85.
What frequency should you practice yoga? Because you said your dad was twice a week. How
he's
often?
Twice a week. And I would say at a minimum twice a week. I really think that, most of my students do twice a week, and I'm always trying to nudge them into try and get an extra class in, which they can do as a recording, because if you think of the joint renewal system as daily hygiene for the joints, you really notice when you don't brush your teeth, for example. Mm-hmm. Right, you've got that little fuzz on your mouth, and your tongue tastes awful, and you really notice it. Well, when you have a daily hygiene for the joints, you really notice when you don't practice. You start to get that sense, that awareness in your body of like, oh my goodness, I haven't done my yoga today. And life gets in the way and you don't practice and you go on holiday and there's no opportunity and you're busy, you've got visitors and you don't get to your mat. That's fine. We'll all skip a week or here or there. But if you really have that sense of daily hygiene for the joints embedded, then you don't miss. You just go for it. You just get on your mat and you do your work.
Now, you said that you are currently living in Canada, and I could tell outside of the French Canadian accent. I also can tell. I hope that's a French Canadian accent.
No, it's a British accent.
British. That's what. Yeah, British. That's what I meant to say. British. Outside of that, I know the British accent because you said you go on a holiday, and here in the States we call it a vacation. So, yes, I've always been fascinated with that. Well, I'm originally from Philadelphia. And there's a movie called Philadelphia where two actors, Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington, they're attorneys, and Denzel Washington, I always ask all of my guests to explain it like this. Denzel Washington was an attorney, and he asked a witness to explain it to him like he was a 6-year-old. And I want you to explain to me, just like I'm a 6-year-old, what do I do first? What's the first thing I need to do if I wanted to create a better lifestyle and use yoga as a tool or a strategy to help me live a better lifestyle? Because as soon as this podcast ends, I want to try some yoga. I want to try that. What is the first thing do I need to do? Is it an app? Is it calling someone? Is it Google? What do I need to do? Just like if I'm a 6-year-old and don't understand anything about yoga, what's the first thing I need to do?
The first thing you need to do is find a teacher.
Okay.
find someone who's going to support you in your practice. And I would highly recommend any Kayut yoga teacher. You can Google Kayut yoga teachers and look, and there's plenty of us out there. We're not very well known, but we're growing. We're a growing tribe. Of course, people are very welcome to contact me, Kathy White at kathywhiteyoga.com. And when you have your teacher, then you're going to start doing classes as often as you can manage. And if you want to, right after listening to this podcast, if you want to do one posture for yourself, which will get to the heart of what we're doing in the joint renewal system, is lie on the floor, lie on your back, have your head maybe on a little pillow if you need it supported. Otherwise, just have your head flat. Have a gap between the wall and your hips and have your legs up the wall. Now, some people can't find a wall in their house to put their legs up. They've got so much stuff in their house. There's bookcases and tables and televisions, and they can't find a wall. If you can't find a wall, close one of your doors and use the door and set your yoga mat. And you don't need a yoga mat. You can just put a blanket. Put a blanket on the floor by the door, put your legs up the door, and just wait. If you want to advance that, you interlace your hands under your head. Just change the angle of your shoulders and arms. If there's tension or tightness in your shoulders or arms, just keep your arms down by your side.
How long? You said just wait. How long do you wait?
I would say if you did legs up the wall for 5 minutes a day, just to calm the nervous system down enough, just to allow the mind to settle, allow the heart the blood pressure to drop, the heart, the circulation to improve, because your whole circulation system changes as soon as you put your legs up, elevate your legs up. And if you just did that for 5 minutes a day for a week, then you'd be really curious as to what comes next. You'd want to know what comes next. You'd be keen to go, yeah, so that what else is in this practice? What else can I add to this way of working? Because it's so still, it's so easy. We're just using gravity, the wall, and time to work. I can do that. And it's very accessible. You don't need to be, you don't need a fancy gym membership. You don't need any equipment to do this. You just need a door, a blanket. Everyone's got that at home somewhere.
What about,
if you don't have a blanket, a towel?
What about, can I add maybe some spa music or something to relax me? Or is that?
I tend to veer people away from music, David, but that's maybe because as a teacher, I have to be very wary. Like I'll put some spa music on, which you love, but the person next to you would go, oh my God, what is this elevator music? I hate it. This is really annoying. So, I have to be really careful in curating musical choices. So I tend to just go for silence.
Okay.
If you know there is some music which drops you into silence, that you can find the silence of your mind and you can find the quietening of your breath, that music helps, for sure. There's no harm in adding some tunes to what you're doing for those 5 minutes. However, I really like to invite people to open their ears and just listen to the sounds around them and see if they can listen to the spaces between the sounds, the spaces between the thoughts, because that creates a spaciousness in the mind, which is the foundation for finding spaciousness in the body.
Wow, that's amazing. So we're laying on our back with our legs straight in the air. However, the wall is basically supporting the legs.
Yeah. So the back of your
Wow.
heels is against the wall, and you have a good distance between your, you're not jammed up with your hips against the wall. So you're not an L shape. Your legs are at a slight angle.
Okay, gotcha. So are your feet actually touching the wall or
Yeah, your feet are
okay.
touching the wall. Your feet are resting on the wall.
Gotcha. I'm definitely gonna try this.
Yeah, and okay, so I give you a little science behind that pose. Um, Viparita Karani, it's called in Sanskrit, legs up the wall, inverted pose. Um, when you put your legs up the wall, it creates a change in the blood pressure. So, because all the blood pours from your legs and starts to surrounding your heart, and it feels like your blood pressure has gone up, and the heart goes, "Uh-oh, what's going on here? Blood pressure's gone up. We need to," and we have something called the baroreceptors within us physically that will send a little signal to say, time to lower blood pressure, time to vasodilate, time to change the breath, time to, and everything can settle to lower the blood pressure. But we've kind of tricked the system because our blood pressure has gone up in a state of relaxation. As soon as you get those legs up the wall, most people just go, ah,
Wow.
and feel wonderful. But the system doesn't know that at the beginning. And the system goes, okay, all hands on deck, let's lower the blood pressure. So not only are you in this lovely state of relaxation because you've put your legs up the wall, but your system puts you into an even deeper state of relaxation and rejuvenation because you've got your legs up the wall.
Wow. You have really wow. I'm just speechless because I had no idea that all of this, this is amazing. And again, I'm fascinated with the fact of how it can actually affect us emotionally. Probably now, correct me in a few minutes we have left. Will this affect can this affect our stress levels?
This is what everyone needs. This is what the world needs. Today, on the day we're recording this podcast, David, I'm not sure when it's going to be broadcast, but today we're recording on solstice, June 21st, and it's International Yoga Day. And the theme that the United Nations have placed on today's International Day of Yoga is yoga for humanity. Now, if there's one thing that I believe humanity really needs at this time and this place, post-pandemic, war raging in the Ukraine, crises in the financial markets, is a place to settle our minds, settle our hearts, and de-stress that doesn't involve drugs, alcohol, all those kind of places where we try to get out of our stress.
Right.
This is the solution. Just de-stress, de-traumatize ourselves, come back into our body and allow the body to heal, because the body has, we cut ourselves, right? And we fail to notice that amazing miracle of the skin healing.
Yes.
Well, that is happening all the time in our whole system. The right conditions for healing, the body will heal. We just have to provide the right conditions, and often we don't because we're so busy going at our busy lives and keeping going, and we're frantic and we're stressed and we're tired and time to just zone it, turn it all down, turn that volume down, put your legs up the wall and relax.
Yes. Well, we're out of time. Time definitely flies when you're having fun. And this has been so powerful and inspirational to me. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk to us. How could we get in touch with you again if you give us your information? I do have your website.
Yeah, I'd be happy for people. They can email me, Kathy at kathywhiteyoga.com, or look up my website. I have a free guide, the joint renewal guide, and that's on www.kathywhiteyoga.com. And it's Kathy with a K and White with an I, Kathy White Yoga, all one word.com. And David, if people sign up for the free joint renewal guide, I also have a challenge that comes up depending on when this podcast is broadcast. And it's called the 7 C's for joint renewal. And we go through a different quality each day of the 7 days that I run the challenge. And we look at things like courage and care and commitment to our practice to really help people ground what it is that they're doing when they're practicing yoga.
Wow. Well, Kathy, thank you so much. And hopefully we can do this again and can give you some results on, what I've started, and then get you as a coach, because I need the physical trainer and a emotional trainer and every kind.
Love to, David. Yeah, absolutely be my pleasure to help you or point you in the right direction to someone who can help you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us. Well, my friends, we're out of time for this podcast, The Underground Subway. I appreciate you for tuning in and listening. I want to give a special thank you to my guest, Kathy White, who I refer to as the Yoga Lady, and thank her for her wisdom, her experience, and her guidance in going forward. Thank you for spending time with us with the Underground Subway, and hopefully you've heard something that will help you, will trigger something in you to live a better life. So before we go, I want to challenge you. I want to issue you a challenge tonight before you go to bed. I want you to look yourself in the eyes, find a mirror, and stare yourself right in the eyes and ask yourself a question before you go to bed. Today, did I do something to make this world a better place? Did I do something to make myself a better person? Or did I simply waste another day? Think about that. No more time to waste. It's time to get busy. I'm David Austin, and I'll see you next time on the Underground Subway.